as I thought. I don't know. Maybe I was hearing something. Okay. Well, while people are tuning in, possibly, at this late hour, cheers, boys and girls. It's funny because neither of you are girls, but here we are.
I don't judge.
Cheers? Yeah. What's with the face, Griggs? It's Cuddy Sark. You look twitchy.
I'm not a fan.
It's a blended Scotch whiskey.
I'm not a fan of Scotch.
Smooth.
It's actually pretty smooth. To be fair, it's pretty smooth.
Yeah, smooth as shit coming out of a goose's ass.
Gross.
That is known to be smooth.
Yeah, well, I mean, it comes right out of there, right?
Well, it's rather liquidy.
It just slides right out of there.
Horrible image, but point taken.
Gross. Okay. Let me get this going here real quick. I forgot I don't have... let's get our chat room up. And I never changed... What does it say on the deal?
On the what?
On the channel. Does it say 133?
Yeah.
And how? Oh, it says it on here, but not on the...
Yeah, it says it on Twitch.
Yeah, but not on here.
Oh, at the bottom, no, it says 133.
132.
132.
It should
Now
be,
it says 133.
should be good now. Okay.
There's nothing underneath the Avengers picture, though.
Okay. There's nothing under the what?
Avengers picture?
Yeah, that's the chat room.
Well, I know, but it usually says SWTOR section.
Nothing under the what?
Avengers
Oh,
picture.
right. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, that's... I think I'm just going to put... What do you want to put? Usual roundup?
Oh. We really should have a thing that says reaction show.
Well, you want me to make one?
Sure. Yeah, that's his mic.
I was just hearing. Okay, here we go. I don't remember which one it was now.
It doesn't matter.
Well, there's something dumb in the background. Okay, we're good. I'll make one real quick. Which one is it? This is screen capture. No, media file, widget, legacy. Make one that says. Let's call it what it is. Infinity War.
Well, you should just have a generic one that we can put up anytime we do a reaction show.
Reaction show.
Spoilers!
Reaction show. Exclamation point. Spoilers! Exclamation point.
That works.
Too much?
Nope. I think it's right on point.
Right on the money.
A little big, but...
That's what she said. Got him. Okay, we're good. Alright, we're good. Anybody in there? Hello? Bueller?
Nope, just you and me.
Alright, let's just make sure we can... I just want to double check settings. Audio. Make sure people can hear us when and if they get in there.
Well, say something.
What? What? Hello?
Yeah.
Bueller? Bueller?
Yep, we got it.
Okay. Alright, we're ready. Alright, let's do it. So, this is not usually this big. There we go.
That's what she said. After I was in there after you. Boom!
I don't know what that says about you. You were in there after me.
Gross.
Right, but she said
Gross indeed.
but she said it's usually not this big. Which means I'm bigger than you, boy.
Well, all right. That's getting racist. Okay, let's move on.
How is that racist?
I just like to make things racist.
You're racist.
All right, let's do this. All right, so what we'll do is we'll do our normal intro deal. We got to make sure we give a shout out to Eddie, who kind of was here and wasn't.
Yep.
And then,
He's a drinking buddy.
yeah, and we'll do the beginning part, gloss over SWTOR, and then we'll just do the two Star Wars stories, and then get into the thing. All right. Sounds good, dude. All right, here we go. Radio silence.
Blast came from the Death Star. That thing's operational.
Dr. Banner. Now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Cat. I'm always angry.
Hello and welcome to episode 133 of The Usual Podcast, a podcast where we discuss Star Wars The Old Republic, the Star Wars franchise, and geek and pop culture. I'm your host, Marshall. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Will. What's up, bro? How you doing?
I don't know why you're giving me that look. I am the proper gentleman on how we start these shows always.
Yeah, you're always just the best. So we also have a guest with us tonight. We have our friend Dan, who just went to see Infinity War with us, and we are going to talk about that very, very soon. But we just want to introduce him and say what's up. Say what's up, dude. How you doing?
Hey guys,
Yeah. So
long time fan.
yeah, and here we are. Yeah, we're drinking beers. What are we drinking? What are you drinking? Will?
I just had a really unflavorful,
It was lovely.
extra spicy Cutty Sark shot.
Something about a goose.
Spicy?
It felt spicy.
Well, here we are. So we did have a shot. Some of us had a shot in the movie theater. Me and Dan over here. Up top. And then we also have Fog Cutter from Lost Coast Brewing Company, which we're imbibing right now as well. And it should be a pretty short show, but, you know, we're going to drink beers and have a good time. And we're glad to have a guest. So here we are. So we have, thanks for being here, man. And it's been a long time coming. You actually went to the movies with us the last couple times, but
Well, it seems like every time I have an actual chance to come in, join you guys, it's after a movie that I know practically nothing about, and all the Star Wars movies I seem to miss. So
yeah.
it should be fun.
Well, and we have Han Solo coming up. And what else we got? Ant-Man the Wasp. We've got a couple good ones coming.
Deadpool.
Yeah.
Oh, Deadpool.
Always good.
I'm really looking
Jurassic
forward
World.
to Deadpool. So yeah, we got some good ones. I don't know if we're going to do reaction shows to all of them, but this will be technically a reaction show, but we do have a couple pieces of news we're going to cover in all our normal sections, so we'll get to that in just a second. So before we get started, if you have comments or questions, you can find us at theusualpodcast.com. Email us at theusualpodcast@gmail.com, and we're on Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. I am on Twitter at Darth Pops, and Will is at I'm Will Griggs, and we're on iTunes, Stitch Radio, Google Play, and all your favorite podcatchers. So find us, like us, share us, and tell your friends. We have some ways to support the show. Obviously, you can become a patron, which we'll talk about our drinking buddies in a second. But you can go to teespring.com/store/usual podcast. We got some merch up there and all that kind of stuff. And we'll talk about some other stuff towards the end of the show. Timestamps in the show notes if you're not a SWTOR fan. But again, we're going to spend about, I don't know, maybe a minute or two in SWTOR. So I wouldn't jump around. I don't even know if I'm going to do timestamps. This is a reaction show, so we're just going to keep going. And thanks to everybody who is in the chat room. And here we are, drinking buddies.
Drinking buddies.
Let's get to it. So, dude, I'm not even going to play the bumper for SWTOR because, again, this is more of a reaction show. But I want to give a shout-out to Eddie, who actually went to the movie with us tonight.
He did.
And, sadly, he elected not to come back home with us and record a reaction. Well, it's okay. I'm not going to hold it against him. He's supported the show for a real long time.
Absolutely.
So, big shout-out to Eddie. And, of course, John Skeen.
Yep.
Hero of my life, John Skeen.
Absolutely.
Sometimes substitute on our show, and awesome dude all around. Sends us beer, which is great.
He does.
Anybody that sends me beer is a special human person.
That was weird.
Why?
Because you're weird.
Thanks. All right, so SWTOR, dude. The only thing I want to talk about SWTOR wise this week is we haven't missed out on any news.
I know, right?
And really what it comes down to is Eric Musco, who is the face
Yeah.
of
The
SWTOR for the community. He is taking a few weeks off.
Yes.
And this is one because it's his birthday. Happy birthday, Eric Musco.
I would sing if it didn't cost us money.
It's not going to cost money. It's a common, what
It
you
is
call it
not
now.
common.
Yeah, it is.
No,
Yeah, it is.
no, it's not.
They do it all the time.
It's not.
Everybody sings happy birthday all the time now.
Why do you think when we worked at Applebee's we had to go happy birthday?
No, I know,
Applebee's
dude,
to
but
you"?
it's
It is not in the public domain.
it is now. I promise you.
I am looking.
They do it on Hollywood Babylon all the time.
I am looking this up.
You can change the lyrics to Sapo Verde, which means green frog.
Well, here we are.
That's Sapo Verde to you.
Yeah, Green
They
Frog.
don't sing Happy
Eric
Birthday on
Musco.
Hollywood Babylon. They sing
They do. I promise
David
you do.
Bowie.
Oh. Anyway, I'm looking for a new podcast partner and doesn't understand that we can say happy birthday now. Anyway, I just want to say happy birthday, Eric Musco. Also, even bigger than that is he's getting married.
Very big.
Yeah, and he's getting married. He's taking a little time off. So I want to give a big shout out to Eric Musco, who is the community manager for the game we've been playing for over 6 years. And we love Eric. I met him a bunch of times. He's an awesome guy. Congrats. I've been married for a bit myself.
11
Best of luck,
years.
my friend.
I will actually admit that I am wrong.
Yeah, I know.
And that Marshall is right for once, and that it went into the public domain in June of 2016.
I feel like you guys should have like a horn or something. You could
Yeah.
like every
Like,
time that happens.
Bam, bam, bam. Something.
Wah, wah.
It's the Marshall's rights horn. Womp womp.
God, I would love that.
Well,
This is why we should have Dan more often.
well,
He's got my back.
it's been 3 years, and this will be the first time we played it.
Wow. Okay, so Swotor wise, have you played the game at all this week?
I just did some heroics and did some general maintenance.
Yeah, I haven't done much either. I'm waiting.
No,
Oh, here we go.
I actually played the Eternal Championship, and I still have not been able to beat it.
Yeah, it came out like 4 years ago.
No, like
Just
a year and a
kidding,
half.
like
But
2
no,
years
still,
ago.
for some reason, I cannot beat it.
It's fine. I'll show
Even
you.
with a level 50 companion.
I think you're just doing it wrong.
I am doing it. You know me. Hello. I'm horrible at mechanics.
Here's the thing. Once people hear this, they're going to be like, bro, are you doing this, this, and this? And then,
I still have only completed half the Star Fortresses.
wow. All right. Well, we're going to move past that, and we're going to go into Star Wars. And the big news of the day, and I think we're very current right now, dude. I feel like these last two, we're going to talk about 2 Star Wars stories, and I'm glad Dan is here because he is a big Star Wars fan as well. And we have 2 stories. The first one is Star Wars 9 is casting a major Legends Expanded Universe character, and the code name right now is Mara.
Hello.
Well, obviously, if you're a fan of the Expanded Universe, we're talking Mara Jade. Hopefully. I don't know where that fits in with Episode 9. I have a theory, but Will's not a fan. Will's not a fan of my theory.
I'm not. Go ahead and tell him your theory.
So my theory is this. Dan might get my back. I don't know. But my theory is if JJ's coming in now with Episode 9, we have Rey's parentage sort of left, I don't know, not ambiguous, but just open-ended a bit because they might be nobody, but they could be somebody. Doesn't matter, whatever. The point is, I don't think it matters with Rey, but really, Mara Jade in the Expanded Universe is Luke Skywalker's wife at some point. And they have a kid named Ben in the Expanded Universe, and that's a thing. So, in the current canon, we have Ben, who is Kylo Ren, and we have Rey, right? We have, obviously there's a connection between Luke and Rey and all the other Force users. I don't know what that means, but I like to think that maybe JJ is going to but bring back his idea of what he wanted Rey's parentage to
And
be.
here's why I'm hoping they don't do that.
No, I don't want them to do it.
Is because they've already made it a MacGuffin.
Yeah.
That it's just there, and it was like misdirection.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, okay, no, it doesn't really matter. Now, if they go back to it and say, now it's MacGuffin's MacGuffin, and it's like, no, and it just means that
You
they
can't
don't have,
MacGuffin a MacGuffin?
it just means that they don't have their shit together.
Well,
but you know that you know that there's more to the story than just being sold for drinking money.
No, I know that, but I think it was brilliant that they made it so it was nobody.
okay, what if Mara Jade has no interaction with Luke Skywalker at all? What if Mara Jade is actually Rey's mom? And we get another story there, right? And although she's not connected to the Expanded Universe, Mara Jade is a person, and it would be really nice actually if they went with. I like that her story, her origin story is that she was the hand of the Emperor, right?
Right.
So what if that was still a thing,
Okay.
and maybe she's Rey's mom
Okay. This is
or
where
aunt
no,
or something?
no. Actually, this is where I'm going with it.
Okay.
I think it can wrap it all up and make Mara Jade the current Kenobi character. Okay? What if she was the hand of the Emperor, but in the story we're going to have coming up, in the new Resistance cartoon, that's when Luke recruits her away from the Emperor to his academy.
All right.
When the Knights of Ren, because how old is, I mean, Rey was left on Jakku when she was like, what, 7 or 8? That's what it looks like. She was.
I think she's a little younger now.
Okay, so say 6.
Okay.
We're assuming that she's about 18, right? At the beginning of this, just like Luke
Yeah,
was.
18, 19, sure.
And Kylo's looking mid-20s, right?
Sure.
Okay, so he's about 8 or 9 years older than she is. What if, when the Knights of Ren usurped Luke and brought down the Academy, Luke entrusted this other youngling, Rey, who was sold for drinking money at one point,
All right.
but went to the Academy. She does not remember it. He wiped her mind or whatever,
Sure.
and sent her with Mara to Jakku on the Millennium Falcon, and that's how all that crap ended up on Jakku.
Yeah, no, and I don't know. I like what you're saying. I just don't like all of it. I honestly think that, well, I like the Jakku part. I actually do like that. I like that there has to be a connection between the two of them, and there has to be a reason she ended up on Jakku in the first
Right.
place. There has to be a reason the Falcon got there in the first place.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, obviously, that's not. I mean, I just thought it's not really well thought out. And well
Sure.
written, but
Neither
that's
was my
that's
theory.
It's a decent framework of what could possibly
Yeah.
be fleshed out.
I like the idea of, so we have Finn, right, who was a stormtrooper. I like that if JJ decides to go with
Janitor.
what?
Janitor.
Yeah. So if JJ goes with the kind of with the Emperor's hand thing, right, or a high up Imperial another fallen Imperial, right? Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense.
And her having something to do with the Resistance, I think that would be kind of cool. I don't know what that looks like. I would like it to be connected to Rey, sort of in some way, shape, or form, but it doesn't have to be, considering they're going to be done with the Skywalker and all this storyline after 9 anyway. I feel like JJ has a plan, but we'll see. Any thoughts, Dan?
Well, the only thing I was thinking when you just brought that theory up was the reaction Luke had when Rey found him, and that would have been, I think, the response that he, I mean, now that I think back on it, the response that he gave her upon finding him wasn't actually that surprised.
Right.
I mean, it was kind of like, bothered, but it wasn't like
Right, and if he
shocked.
did,
So-
if he did wipe her mind or whatever, regardless of whatever,
But it wasn't familiar, though.
trope
That was
he
the other
wanted
thing.
to-
If he had wiped her mind,
Right.
he wouldn't have had to play into the fact that that this was the first meeting, because he would be confident that she wouldn't remember but
Well, except
so
for he wouldn't have it so far
like
open
there
in
would be
his
more hints
emotions,
dropped.
like, okay, I don't have to hide this. He would definitely subdue it because he would know that as a Force user, she would pick up on those.
I don't know, man. I honestly think there was a little bit more of a. I like to think that Luke knew of her
I like to think it's
before
like
she showed up.
Oh,
it's a hidden sister of Aunt Beru. That's what I like. That's what I like to think.
But I mean, and again, and this goes, everybody doesn't have to be connected. And actually, that was one of the things I liked about Episode 8 was that they didn't make a point of saying her parents are this big thing and it's a big deal.
Right.
It's like, no, your parents are shit, and this is it, and this is how you're gonna move
right.
on now.
And that's why my idea is it just shows that the Force can come from anywhere.
Exactly.
Because
We got Broom Boy too.
exactly,
Right.
It just reinforces that concept.
Right. All right. So, any other thoughts? Are we good?
No, I'm good.
All right. Let's go to our last Star Wars story.
Really quick reminder for Dan here: this is an audio medium.
What is that supposed to mean?
No nodding to yes or no.
Oh, yeah.
questions.
Oh yeah.
You can hear that, right?
Yeah. You can hear us nodding.
The
And those of you
breeze
turn-
going past the microphone. Is like,
All right. So if we get a bunch of people in the chat room, I will probably have you get in a camera just for fun. But so the last thing here, and this is from officially StarWars.com, actually announced today, and we're recording this on the 26th of April. This is the announcement finally of the next animated series.
The Filoni project.
Yeah, and so I'll just read the announcement. StarWars.com is thrilled to announce that production has begun on Star Wars Resistance, an exciting new animated adventure, series about Kensuda Xano, a young pilot recruited by the Resistance and tasked with a top secret mission to spy on the growing threat of the First Order. It will premiere this fall on Disney Channel in the U.S. and thereafter on Disney XD and around the world. And this says, featuring high-flying adventure that audiences of all ages have come to expect from Star Wars. Star Wars Resistance, set in the time prior to The Force Awakens, will feature the beloved droid BB-8 alongside ace pilots, colorful new characters, and appearances by fan favorites including Poe Dameron, Captain Phasma, voiced by Oscar Isaac, and Gwendolyn Christie, respectively. And obviously we know Dave Filoni created it, and they go into the creation. So
Right.
there's a couple quotes here from Filoni, but I'm just curious what you guys think. Is this the direction you thought they were going to go? I mean, you and I obviously have watched Rebels. I don't know if you have, but, you know.
Yeah, well, regardless of the content, it's the time period I thought they would go into, because we said that we eventually wanted them to hopefully bring Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra
Right.
back into the modern trilogy somehow, and this might be the way to do it.
True.
I think it seems inevitable. They had to, after going back to the first animated series they did after Attack of the Clones, which was awesome, and
Right.
and then all the subsequent series they had after that. I mean, it just makes sense they'd go into this, and I'm actually wondering what you guys think of the time frame on seeing the first full featured Star Wars animated movie would be.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, they're gonna bring it together. I mean, they could.
Well, and if they're gonna do what they've always done, well, I don't want to say what they've always done, but with the Clone Wars and with Rebels, they did like sort of a hour-long movie to kick it off.
Spark of Rebellion.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty, and I'm with you, Dan. I'm curious to see if they're gonna do sort of how I want to know how closely they're gonna put it to Force Awakens, if I'm being honest, because. How young are we talking?
When Clone Wars came out, the very first rendition of that animated series, I loved it. To me, that was as badass as the movie should have been.
It was good. I really liked it too.
And I mean that was when I saw that, I was like, okay, this makes up for some of the more tame parts of the movie that I thought could be a little more badass.
And I actually didn't get as far into the Clone Wars as I would have liked. And people that listen to the show know I didn't get much further past the second season, but I'm very curious to see what they're gonna do. Here's my fear. My fear is that they're gonna do kind of what they did with the comics, and they're gonna kind of retcon stuff as they go.
Okay.
And that's kind of my fear, but my hope is that they're gonna do more backstory of Phasma and stuff like that to more flesh out what we saw in episode, I guess, 7 and 8.
Right. No, what I see them doing is, well, I don't see not what I see them doing. What's really going to clarify it in time frame is Poe going to be a contemporary of this pilot, the hotshot pilot that they're supposed to be introducing, or is he going to be a mentor to that pilot?
Right. Yeah.
If it's a mentor, it's closer to the Force Awakens. If he's a contemporary, it's going to be a good 10 years earlier.
Right. And they have, they have roughly 30 years to play with.
Yeah.
And
it shows some of the training of Finn, why he was different, as why he had a heart.
Well, and depending on how far they go back and what they do determines how close to Rebels they are too.
Right. Well, they're easily going to be able to pull into,
well, not Rebels, I guess, but
the Phasma book that they're going to be able to pull in. They're going to be able to pull in the Aftermath books. They can tie in with any of these.
I hear you. All right. Well, we'll report on that as it develops. I'm excited. I love the animated stuff. That's the thing. That's the kind of stuff. That's the stuff I watch with my kids.
Yeah, I mean, if they're smart, they're going to also pull in the Galaxy's Edge planet.
Oh, for sure.
They're going to have to.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Let's do what we set out to do. 25 minutes later. Let's talk about the freaking movie we saw tonight. So if you're in the chat room, know this is our reaction show to Marvel's Avengers Infinity War.
Right.
And we are going to talk the poop out of that.
We're going to spoil the heck out of it.
And we're going to have hella spoilers. It's in the show thing. So this is your warning. All right. Where do we want to start?
First off, let's just the logos, the intro logo. I loved that they actually in Marvel Studios they made the IO in Studios a 10 because it's the 10th anniversary.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they made it a red 10, so
All right.
I like that.
Cool.
I'm guessing we're also going to get that in Ant-Man, which is later this year. So
Nice. All right. So let's just talk about the movie. So we got honestly. So a lot of times what he and I usually do is we kind of will say the things we like, things we didn't like, stuff like that. Let's kind of start at the beginning of the film. Okay. We have obviously it's in, and I think it's safe to say there are three kind of
major
storylines going on.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got the Guardians.
Right. Let's call them Space, New York, and Wakanda.
Okay, so we've got Wakanda. Yeah, exactly. So let's start with the Guardians stuff. And I'm a big Guardians of the Galaxy guy. I love those movies. I think they did a pretty good job with the characters personally. Obviously, they couldn't. I honestly felt like they had a bigger role than I thought they would in this one.
Right. Well, you kind of had. They were kind of like the connective tissue
True.
because they connected Thor to.
Well, they literally brought.
Right, but they also connected to Stark, and
Right.
So
So that was kind of cool. Thoughts on the Guardians? Anything else on Guardians?
I like that they didn't go overkill on their music. They
Yeah.
played one song, "The Rubber Band Man,"
Right.
which is a great song.
Yeah.
Um,
And they had him singing in the
Little character
beginning.
Exactly, 'cause
association.
it
It's
was
like,
the-
oh yeah, these guys, they're funky.
Yeah.
exactly.
And that was honestly kind of a bummer for me. Only in that's why I love the Guardians is because of the music, but it's not a Guardians movie.
Exactly.
You
And
know.
they put they, as you said, they had a, for myself, they had a much bigger role than I expected too. Just
Yeah.
Because of the teaser trailers, that it's like you expect them just kind of like, make an appearance, but they did so without really moving the Guardians story along really far either. They kind of like kept him where where you last saw him. Like Groot was a little bit older. He was,
But-
Yeah, well, I mean, Guardians obviously had. I mean, I think obviously had to have a bigger role just because of Gamora's connection to Thanos.
Right. And I like that.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
They basically play the role of the narrator.
Yeah, they tied it in really well, and it does make sense. You're right, because Gamora and Nebula obviously have a massive connection to Thanos, so they had to be a bigger part of this. But they weren't the heroes of the piece. They were more, like you said, the connective tissue. But what I like is that it was obvious that it was a couple years after we saw them last because Groot's a little older, like you said.
Quill's a little heavier.
And Quill's a little, yeah. But all of that said, they it's almost like you get the impression that this is like an episode of their lives
oh yeah,
and they're going to move on past this because we know, I mean, and we know there's going to be a Guardians 3.
right.
Right.
Well, I mean, it shows that it's just an episode of their lives. That I mean, it's a very monumental episode, obviously.
No, but they have
But it's
a
because
lot going on.
Well,
and,
their introduction also is that they're just answering a distress call.
yeah. And it's like, all right, we're doing our thing.
The only thing
Should we
I was
rob
gonna
them
say was
after?
Here
That
we
kind
go again.
Yeah, and that's why I like those guys because I'm a big anti-hero kind of guy, and that group is the epitome of what it means to be an anti-hero. They're debating on the way to the distress call, like, well, I mean, if we're gonna rob them while we're there, I don't remember, or take their ship or whatever they were
Right,
saying.
take
I
their
don't remember, but anyway, so the Guardians plotline was cool. So what do we think about what they did with the New York characters? So let's talk about that.
I liked it that it was just when it. Okay, the introduction of all the characters, it was just like it was an everyday sort of day.
Yeah,
The Guardians were just about to go do a distress call. Wong and Strange were arguing about getting money for food.
which I thought was hilarious. by the
Stark
way.
and Pepper were off on a jog in the park.
Yeah, I like what they did with Strange.
Freaking Peter Parker was on a field trip.
And when he shows up, he's like, I was on a field trip, and then this happened, and I was
Well,
like,
and that was one of my favorite things. Is like you get one line or two lines from his best friend,
mm,
and he doesn't need any explanation. Peter says, "Cause a distraction." He doesn't ask why. He doesn't say. He jumps up and says, "We're all gonna die."
Well,
It was
I love
awesome.
that. I love that guy too. Just in the Spider-Man movie, though, just
Oh,
how
yeah.
how
Yeah.
awesome it is for him just to be part of it.
yeah, he's like,
Exactly.
I'm gonna do my part.
I get to do something. I get to be part of it. Like
He's
doesn't
he's
even
what
think about it.
all
He's
gonna
he's
die.
all-
That was
he
great.
is to Peter's world what Peter is to the Avengers.
Exactly, and there was really a lot of nods to a lot of the other movies, or a lot of the other storylines. Obviously, with Peter Parker wanting to be part of the Avengers. At some point, he's like, "Yeah, you're part of the Avengers now. Okay, let's move on."
Exactly.
And little subtle things.
Yeah, and we talked about this specifically about that scene and how that was one of the few times you got an Avengers cue
Right.
in the music. And Alan Silvestri did the music for this again, a brilliant composer, because he did the Back to the Future music. He did
Right.
Forrest Gump. He did Ready Player One.
Right, and what Will's referring to is off mic before even Dan got here. I had noticed, and I don't know if I point out to you, maybe it was Eddie, but there were only 2 songs on the billing at the end.
Yes,
and
I noticed that.
And I thought that was really interesting, and part of it had to do with the Guardians song that they played, but it wasn't about, there wasn't memorable music moments. It was more like
it was subtle cues throughout the movie. It's like
The main theme, like,
right,
they played through.
But they played the Avengers theme, I don't think, as much as they could have.
Right.
There was the moment where Thor comes in with the lightning.
They
and
kind of hit it over the head with you in Ultron. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
This one's just much more subtle.
Exactly.
Which shows that it's a shift in the universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and going back to the part where they were all just kind of in their ordinary lives and sort of got brought into it, which I think I agree with was cool to see. But I will say there was a bit of sort of it for me. It kind of made it a little fractioned or disjointed a little bit, you know, because you had to bring out, like, they're all doing such separate, different things, and then the way they come together wasn't quite as smooth or seamless. I mean, I felt like there was a lot of time spent on why they were, you know, how they kind of came together, and sort of like each bringing their, you know, kind of their either resistance or enthusiasm to the project, whatever it was. But I feel like that was maybe just for me a one point where it was a little bit, just sort of just kind of a rocky. You know?
Well, and I think the problem there is that everybody was in such different places when this movie takes place,
Yeah,
and so
from outer space to on a school bus.
Yeah, so it's like, how do we connect everybody, and how do we jump seamlessly? And yeah, there were moments where I was like, oh, okay, that's a little, okay, now I get it. But and that's, I think, the issue with, at this point, the way Marvel's doing things, and I'm not going to slight them because they're doing a good job, and they're making great films. But I think the problem is you could not come into this film really not knowing, not having seen at least Guardians of the Galaxy and the other Avengers movies, and probably even
Civil War. Definitely,
you would have definitely have to seen Civil War, and you definitely would have seen Black Panther and Homecoming. I mean, you really couldn't come into this movie without having seen
and not just
almost 10 other movies.
Well, exactly. Well, and that's kind of the point. And
I get that.
To kind of fight back
that.
against that, what I think they did do well is, because you're introducing like 67 different speaking roles here,
right?
You didn't have one character introduced at a time at any point.
There were groups.
When Captain America showed up, all the Secret Avengers showed up. It was Captain, it was Falcon, it was
and Black Widow.
Yeah.
Some of them were meeting each other for the first time as well.
Exactly. But when you saw Strange, you saw Wong.
Yeah.
When you saw,
which I loved.
Wong's great.
Oh yeah, Wong.
I love that character.
But when you saw, Black Panther, you saw Winter Soldier.
Exactly.
They were all introduced in little clusters because they had to. The one thing that I thought did make it disjointed is this is the first Marvel movie I've ever seen where they actually used location cards.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
yeah, fair, yeah.
I feel like, did they do it in Age of Ultron?
I like how in the Guardians of the Galaxy, introducing the Guardians, it was just space.
Yeah. Well, which I thought was hilarious.
But it also said
only in that in Guardians of the Galaxy they did put cards up in Guardians of the Galaxy, because they put Nowhere, I remember, and Xandar and stuff like that. But when it was hilarious when the Guardians were first introduced, it was all space. It's like, of course.
Right.
I guess I'm going to see the Guardians.
Cue
so
the music.
Yeah. But I'm with you, man.
I just thought it was a little weird.
Yeah, and they had to do that because we have all these things kind of coming together.
Whiplash if they hadn't.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
It's like in Black Panther, all you really had was Oakland and Wakanda.
Right.
That's about it.
So let's talk about. We talked about most of the main characters. Let's talk about villains for a minute because we talked in the car, I think, about the henchman
The
for
henchman.
Thanos.
Yes.
And then we need to talk about Thanos as well. So obviously we knew Thanos was coming. We knew he was obviously the big bad, and his whole thing, his driving force is obviously the Infinity Stones. I want to come back to him real quick. Let's talk about the henchman really quick because I think you had a pretty cool thing in the car, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just loved Ma. Ma was great.
And that was the female.
No, Ma was the
why do I keep thinking
the
it's the-
telekinetic
Oh yeah.
who was torturing Stephen Strange, who got aliened out the ship.
And I'll tell you what was cool about that too was the fact that who was it? Thor keeps saying they're wizards, right? And like so they're wizards, but then Homeboy's a wizard too.
Exactly.
And so like there's magic and they're fighting with magic. I thought that was really cool in a sci-fi film. I just thought it was neat.
Yeah, exactly. They it was really started bringing in the word-
Mysticism.
Yeah, the mysticism of it.
That's why Doctor Strange is one of my favorite Marvel movies of recent. Because for that because it's all about mysticism and sort of like this kind of like supernatural like mental like parallel universe thing. It's not like Tony Stark and all of his
It's
amazing
tech.
technology,
Yeah.
and it's not like Peter Parker with this weird radioactive like freak accent.
Exactly.
It's just like it's like Razor's Edge kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
Well-
speaking of, one of my favorite moments is where he's sitting cross-legged and he's like, does he always do that? And he's like twitching
Right, because he's going through all the different
and he's going through
features.
all of the different
14 million features.
and he's like 14.5 million different
605, I think.
yeah, something like that. And they're like, well, do we win any? And he's like, yeah, one.
Never
And
tell me
that's
the
the-
odds.
And that's definitely
Right,
And
exactly.
that's definitely referenced later. I want to talk about Doctor Strange here for a second because he's obviously Sorcerer Supreme at this point,
Yeah, for sure.
and this was actually
Full
brought-
command of his powers.
Right.
and
Well,
all
this
that,
is this is actually brought up in Singapore just last couple weeks ago. I think it was last week when they were introducing a whole bunch of stuff and everyone was on stage and they introduced Benedict Cumberbatch and they introduced him as the Sorcerer Supreme.
Oh, that's sick.
And that's not necessarily just calling him because that's what he's in the comics. Marvel wouldn't do that if he isn't the Sorcerer Supreme now.
No, for sure.
And so what I read an article on it, and I'll put it in the newsletter this week. But what it really referenced was that he is the Sorcerer Supreme now, and that Doctor Strange 2 could actually take place before this movie,
Interesting.
and it'll show
Okay.
how he becomes the ultimate Sorcerer Supreme. And what I really liked about his Sorcerer Supreme powers is, first of all, where he turned into the multiple versions of
Yeah, that
himself
was sick.
was awesome. But you also saw him use what he used on the big bads in the Doctor Strange movie, the Mirrorverse, the prism sort of thing.
Right.
Thanos just took it and
And just, yeah.
yeah,
All right, so let's not lose sight of this.
the villains.
Let's stay on the villains real quick. So we've
The
got
girl was fantastic.
yeah, she was good. Giant dude was awesome,
Yep.
and I liked. And this would kind of bridge between one of the hero conversations that you and I actually were talking about. And I'm pointing at Dan, audio medium. When we were talking about Bruce Banner being in the Hulkbuster outfit
And it was Bruce and not Hulk.
and not Hulk, and so that whole thing, I actually had a little bit of an issue with that, and we'll talk about that later. But what I wanted to bring up with that is the fact that he's using this Hulkbuster armor, right? But he's fighting these massive henchmen of Thanos, and I thought that was
Well, even stepping back a step or two before that, the sort of comedy, era of comedies that led him to being in that sort of innuendo of like how he was trying to like get it up.
Yeah.
It's like why he was in there in the first place and
Right.
not the Hulk. He's like come on, like he's like
well,
man.
and we might as well
Take it
talk
up.
about it now. You're right, and that was the issue is that they did. Ultimately, in this movie, they did a really good job, and Marvel was actually pretty good about this, is balancing the power imbalances. Obviously, if Hulk was part of any of those battles, there'd be an imbalance. If Scarlet Witch, and they actually make a joke about it towards the end, why wasn't she here before?
Yeah.
Like, why was she up there the whole time, right?
Because she's
and
very OP.
yeah, and that's the issue. There is definitely a power imbalance with people like the Hulk and Scarlet Witch and Vision even. So with Vision, it makes sense. They have to incapacitate him in order to get the stone. That's the side. So Scarlet Witch is there with him. And then you have Hulk, who can't seem to get Hulk. He's having an internal battle with the Hulk,
Well, what I
but
love
we don't know anything about it.
Right. Well, actually, what I love about it is that the Hulk is driven by anger,
Yeah,
right? But the Hulk is clearly afraid
right.
of Thanos after what happens to him with Loki.
Right.
Okay. And so every time that he tries to bring Hulk out, Hulk starts screaming no.
But also remember this. In Ragnarok, Hulk was the dominant one.
Yes.
He was living the life he wanted to live. Everything was great for the Hulk. And now he doesn't have any of that. And so he's throwing a tantrum. Honestly. I mean, that's how I interpret it. He's having a tantrum. And he's like, you need me, F you. You know what I mean? And I think that's a really interesting way of dealing with the power imbalances, right?
Right.
But going back to the villains, the giant dude was a force to be reckoned with, and the henchmen of Thanos were pretty badass. And I was telling you in the car, I would actually really have liked a little bit more about where they kind of came from and that kind of thing.
Well, you know,
but,
in the comics, I mean, I don't know them well enough in the comics, but you know that in whatever comics that they've appeared in, they aren't just henchmen of Thanos. You got to know that they're the big bad of that comic.
Oh, sure, for sure.
Very much like how the Lee Pace character was in the first Guardians movie.
Right.
God, what's his name?
Wait,
The
who are you talking
Ravager.
Oh, yeah,
Lee Pace,
yeah.
the blue guy.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, I have two questions for you.
Oh, for me?
For both of you guys.
Nifty.
Your favorite cameo
Okay.
and your favorite joke.
Cameo.
Well, by default, I like Stan Lee's cameo, but
Well,
I feel like
don't know if
that's-
this would be considered a cameo, but I and this could also be influenced by the fact that I just got back from Disneyland too and did the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. But I love the Collector.
oh yeah,
and
good one.
The Collector's good.
See him in there.
Mine was either Peter Dinklage as
And Peter Dinklage, yes,
as the
Thank
Forge Elf
and
Yeah.
I love
or the Forge Dwarf.
and just also I love how they made him like a giant.
Yes.
Well,
It's like-
Well, a giant, but they still called him a
but
dwarf.
it was it's like
but he was very large.
they
He was
call
a
him
big-
dwarfs because of the proportions,
Yes.
but he's a giant in regards to humans because he's
Yes.
like 14 feet tall.
Exactly. Which
And
is
so
great.
I thought that was really cool. Yeah,
that was yeah.
yeah,
Or
I like
Red Skull.
Yeah, Red Skull, I think, was pretty big when he showed up. I think
Because-
that was the biggest reaction
Yeah,
crowd-wise.
because in Captain America, the very first Captain
Yeah.
America, when he disappears, all you see him do is disintegrate. You
Right.
don't see him die.
Right. So,
He
Red
said
Skull was
the
cool.
Tesseract sent him there.
Peter Dinklage, great. Favorite cameo?
I think Peter Dinklage would cap it. That's good.
Yeah,
favorite
I'm gonna stay with Dinklage and of course a nod to 95-year-old Stanley. I mean,
Yeah.
driving a bus, the bus, the field trip bus. I thought that was
Yeah.
good. But what was your other question?
Favorite joke. I'm the one thing I don't like about going on opening nights is there's so much fan reaction that you
Yeah.
miss the underlying
You
jokes.
do miss the underlying jokes, and that was a
so
bummer.
I'm going to see it again on Saturday
Okay.
in the matinee. So I should be much quieter. A lot of older people.
Yeah.
I'm taking my mom.
Oh, good.
But my favorite joke was when Thor responds to Groot talking Groot.
That was good.
And Rocket looks at him and says, "You speak I am Groot?" And he goes, "Yeah, they offered it as an elective."
And I'm gonna piggyback on that. One of my favorite jokes was Steve Rogers saying, "Oh, I am Steve Rogers," and it's not a joke, but it's a joke because of everything that comes before that. He's only meeting Groot for the first time.
Right.
We get the quip, obviously from Thor, but it's hilarious because he's like, "Oh, I am Steve Rogers,"
It
and he
reminded-
he
yeah.
doesn't
Kinda
understand
like when Peter
that.
Parker's like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
we're using our made-up name.
Yeah,
I'm
and
Spider-Man.
that's a good
That was
one
great
too.
joke.
Yeah.
The I am Steve Rogers reminded me a lot of like that. Steve Rogers is very good about connecting with whoever he's meeting.
Absolutely.
Right? So, like, when he first met Peter for the first time in Civil War, he's like, the Queen, are you from Queens?
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like, the Bronx.
He's the
Or
Bronx.
from Brooklyn.
Yeah, from Brooklyn. Yeah, that was cool too. So yeah, there were a couple of other jokes earlier in the movie that I've since forgotten, but there were some pretty funny,
When
pretty
Groot
funny
says
moments.
something inappropriate and they'll go, hey!
Yeah, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. I think they. I don't know when you want to get into stuff we had issues with, but one of the issues I had was actually with Groot. I actually had an issue that they made it to where he was so enamored with the video game that he was
did you
so.
notice what video game it was?
Yeah, it was Defenders?
Defender?
No, yeah, and that's
They're
great.
Earth's mightiest defenders.
I get it, but that he was so enamored with that, like, there was no jump from, oh, I'm so into this game and now I want to help my friends. At some point, you just saw him helping his friends. You know what I mean? So, like, do you see where I'm going with this?
He was, well, they established him as because the last time we saw him, he was sort of like that rambunctious kid that just wanted to, like, get into the scrap. Now he's a little bit older. He's like probably, he's like
being a
13,
teenager.
14, being
Yeah.
a teenager. He's
Well, he
just
was.
like, whatever, guys. Like, he just like wants to like be left alone. And so they established that. But then after that, it was like he kind of didn't have a choice. I mean, now they're like being attacked and all over, and it would have been weird if he would have just sat there and been like, whatever, guys, because
But-
like he
Okay,
kinda
well,
had
the-
to like
okay,
jump
the
in.
two things about it.
But I'm with you. But and sorry to interrupt. But my issue is that, like, most of the times in the beginning of the movie, you see him playing the game, and you see him playing the game when there's peril. But then, like, when they needed him to be in the fight, he was fighting. But you didn't see, like, okay, I'm putting this down
But
willingly.
Put it down, but
Yeah,
okay,
it's like
guys.
even a huff and a puff would have been
You guys are
nice.
so lame.
Like,
No, I'm
fine.
fighting against this.
Oh,
because
where are
I
you?
believe there is a moment.
Okay.
And it's going to be my second point.
Okay.
My first point is this isn't Groot.
Oh
This is-
yeah,
this
that's
is
true.
Groot
It's
Jr.
not Groot.
So
You're
we're
right.
putting adult Groot that sacrificed himself in the
saying, I
first
agree.
Guardians
Yeah.
onto this person
True.
when it's a completely different entity.
Different entity. Got it.
Okay. Second,
We're learning the personalities of Groot.
exactly.
Right.
Now, secondly, and obviously the whole Groot thing, it's obviously a major civilization because they taught the language to
Sure.
Asgardians.
Right.
Okay. The point where he does decide to join the fight is when they're at the Starforge and they're building the thing, and he sacrifices his limb to create the handle.
Yeah, that was cool.
And that's when he
That
sets
was a
down
really
the
cool
game
moment.
and lets his hand go.
Okay.
And
You're right.
And then after that, when they get to Earth, he's fighting.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Okay, and I actually had strangely forgotten that moment. I thought, as far as a badass moment, that was actually one of the ones.
Yes.
We need a handle, and that was
And I
pretty
think
damn
that
cool.
shows the sacrificial nature of the Groot.
Of the Groots, yeah.
And that they're because
He'll
There
grow
was
another
a
one
sec-
in like 3 weeks.
yeah, exactly.
We need more Groot.
Little sprout.
So, all right. So we've talked about villains. We talked about some of the heroes.
Well, all right.
What do we want to talk about?
Well, okay. One thing that was kind of getting to me was why the motivation behind the dude wanting to get all of these Infinity Stones. Like, we know the cliches of, like, yes, power,
Sure.
controlling everything, but I felt like they kept trying to, like, sort of, like, even the way it ended with him, like, looking over the valley with all that, there's, like, this moment of serenity.
Well, that was
like,
the sunset thing he was
oh,
talking
the sun-
about.
But,
Yeah.
but there's this underlying sort of morality or sort of ethical, like, sort of, like need for him to, like have, like, he's got a vision of balance or something, like, some higher motive for doing it that they don't really expand too much on.
Yeah.
And they put, but it's obviously, the whole movie is about, how the lengths and, he's
Well-
willing to go to.
Well, actually,
but
I
that really
mentioned
is-
this.
Like, what's his why? What brought him to that? Like, why is he there in the first place trying to do this? And why did they put that thread of sort of a higher sort of
Yeah.
purpose?
Okay, well, I mentioned this to Carr,
Yeah.
to Marshall in the car on the way back, is that, and this is how they came up with his nickname, the Mad Titan,
Yeah.
is because he's basically a population control extremist, which we do have on this planet. Actually,
Yeah.
one of the podcasts I listen to, shout out to Parcast here, is a podcast called Cult, and one of them is the Church of Euthanasia, and this was a church that had 4 canons, and they they purposely advocated for suicide, sterilization, lack of reproduction, and cannibalism.
Which is a horrible business model, by the way.
That sounds terrible.
No, and they never actually practiced cannibalism,
Sure.
but they were so pro population control because they felt the planet was dying.
Yeah. Well,
And that's kind of what he's doing. He was an extremist that his own people, the Titans, said, "You're mad." And he just decided, he just gained control.
from a character perspective, from a storytelling perspective, it's kind of nice because what they do is they say, okay, this is what he saw and this is what he did as he was younger, and he was looked at by his people as, he was from Titan. He was mad, is what he says, right. And so he's the Mad Titan. Okay, so he was willing to sacrifice half the population to save his people, right? And so he takes that and he says, okay, well, obviously he's insane, but he superimposes that onto the entire universe. And he says, or the galaxy, whatever you want to say. And he says, okay, well, if all the problems on my planet were solved by this, so I can superimpose this on the rest of the universe and say, okay, well, if I do this,
well, they obviously weren't solved on.
But
his
where
planet
was where
No,
was
but
the
that's-
peril of the rest of the universe that he needed? See, the reason.
no,
why
I get what you're saying, but I'm saying this is his issue, and this is
I
his
feel like in Black
mindset.
Panther, the villain was his motives were so well described.
And this is the
by
best
by the end, you're like
Marvel villain that I told him in the car because I said the exact same
'cause
thing.
Yeah, he's like, is he really that bad?
No,
Like,
but
I
but
kind of
the
agree
key
with
thing,
what he's
but
doing.
the key thing you're forgetting
And
is
he
that
he
Killmonger.
kind of almost did that with this guy, but you're like, why is he doing that?
No, the best
No.
Marvel villain is Killmonger because even though Thanos cries and he has to sacrifice Gamora, spoilers, and has to do all these things, he sees an end game, and his end game is the same as what he did on his planet, but it's
But
obviously
what you're
madness.
What you're forgetting is that Killmonger is sane.
Right.
Okay.
Thanos is not.
Thanos is insane.
And that's
So-
the major difference,
Okay,
man.
I did forget that.
You don't have to understand his motivation.
Yeah.
He understands his motivation.
Which is why I think Black Panther works so well, and why Killmonger is regarded as one of the better Marvel villains in all three phases, is because you get it. You get where he's coming from,
Right,
and he's
and-
not
and ulti-
actually insane.
Yeah,
No,
you
and
can-
ultimately
you
at
completely
the end-
sympathize with where
Exactly.
he's coming from.
Exactly.
Right. Well, you sympathize with him, whereas I empathize with Thanos.
Sure.
I don't sympathize with him.
No,
in the
he's a
slightest.
crazy person.
Exactly. But what the ultimate thing is you cannot reason with Thanos.
No.
You could reason with Killmonger because at the very end of the movie, when
That moment's so beautiful.
When T'Challa offers to save him,
Yeah.
he says no.
No.
The more rational thing for me to do is sacrifice myself.
He's like, I should die, and I think that's important. So I think they did a decent job with it. I'm with you on Thanos is
Yeah.
Thanos is interesting because until this movie, you don't see much more than when you
I
see
just
him.
wish I knew more. Like when he's like when he's like, I didn't have a choice. He's like,
Right.
yeah, you did. It's like I wish I knew more. Like what?
when you're dealing
I
with
get the insane thing. And
If
I like,
they
it's
really
like,
wanted, yeah,
it
but
was
if
that-
they really
not-
wanted
not
us
to
to,
go on and on about that point,
no,
but that
when
was
you're
the
dealing
one.
with fanatics, they don't have
right.
that end game.
But
It's
if they really wanted us to empathize with him, then they would have given him a proper backstory to where you see him having to make the decision to kill all his people and blah 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 blah. Like they would have done that.
Well, see,
They
I don't
didn't
think-
do. They didn't do that on purpose because that wouldn't. We don't need that from Thanos because at this point
It's just clear.
he's
Okay, well, I see.
He's insane.
I don't think
Yeah.
he killed his own people.
no, but he was saying that he was the one that said that this needed to happen.
Right, but it didn't happen, and that's why he's doing it so far extreme.
I was under the impression it
No,
did.
because what he said is when they asked, "Is this your planet?" He goes, "It was once beautiful," and he did this.
Right.
And then they called me mad, and this is what happened because I wasn't able to impose my
interesting.
population control.
And I guess Titan is not populated now. Okay.
Exactly.
I guess I misinterpreted that, but okay.
Because if he was able to do what he had planned there, then theoretically it would be a lush environment.
I get
Whereas
you. Okay.
he wasn't able to impose his will and kill half the population. Therefore, they killed their own planet, and now he feels he has to save the rest of the
He's just
universe.
crazy.
Interesting.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
he's crazy.
Kind of going, skip it, going to DC and Superman 2 when it's, when it's
right.
bow before. So
Let's go ahead and
You don't have
talk
to know
about
why he
the
said that. He
wholesale slaughter of half the Avengers.
Yeah, so, all right, let's get to who died and who didn't, and then we're going to wrap this up. So, let's, in the beginning of the film, we have, spoilers, several deaths. We have Loki dies pretty quick. We have Heimdall, who dies pretty quick. And then...
It's implied the Nova Corps is killed.
And yeah, there's implications of the Nova Corps
The Collector.
and the Collector, which I'm not 100% buying that the Collector is dead, but
Right, he
because
might
there
have
was
been in
a
hiding.
there was a reality
Right.
skewing thing
Obviously,
there.
it's the reality stone that he was going after.
Right. But all that said, towards the end of the film, obviously, we get the fact Thanos snaps his fingers and people start dying. So we've got a whole slew of people who die, basically going, disintegrate into ash
Right.
towards the end, including, Scarlet Witch and Vision and
Vision didn't disappear.
no,
Vision was
not
killed by
Vision.
Thanos.
I didn't mean Vision.
Scarlet
Bucky
Witch.
and
Black Panther, Spider-Man.
right.
So do you think that it was a willful intentional like targeted attack
No,
the
he
one-
says
No,
the ones
it's
he
that-
says-
random.
It is. Earlier, when he was talking about his plan back on Titan, his original plan for his own planet is that it would be random. It would target rich and poor alike.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So there's nobody that was immune, and which I liked about the fact that you didn't know towards the end of the film who was going to be like, oh, I don't, and I think Tom Holland's death or Spider-Man's death was actually really poignant in that because he says, oh, I don't feel so well, and Tony Stark is there and he's holding him and he's laying on the ground. And you get to see this whole kind of progression of like, I don't feel so good. Thanks for being there. There's this elongated hug. There's all this stuff going on. And I think that accentuates the fact that you're right. It's not, it could be anybody.
Right. And what I
And-
liked about this is that, and this is something where Marvel kind of like, even though we knew there was going to be a whole bunch of death.
Yeah.
Right. The ones that they specifically chose, I think, went against what everybody was expecting.
Exactly.
Because who are the two people that we were mostly expecting to die because of contracts?
The two that make the most money
Right.
with the contracts ending,
Captain America
Cap
and
and
Tony
Iron
Stark,
Man. And they
right?
didn't die.
They both survived.
Right.
Who's the most popular character in Marvel right now? Black Panther and Spider-Man.
And Spider-Man.
And they're both dead.
Right.
Okay.
And, well, dead.
Well,
Again.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What I really hope does not happen is I hope they don't pull a Twilight, where at the end of Breaking Dawn, this
Oh,
big
I
old
know what you're
battle.
saying.
And
Yeah.
actually, I'm not a huge fan of the Twilight movies, let alone the books. But the
That's
movie,
good to know.
the battle at the end of the last Twilight movie was actually a pretty interesting battle to watch. It was also very good at watching power exchanges and
Okay.
having the right people fighting each other. Right.
I'll take your word for it. I didn't make it.
Okay.
I didn't-
20 minutes.
But
into
basically,
the
what
movie.
happened is you find out it was all a vision in somebody's head that a empath was pretty much putting into see this is what's going to happen if you choose to fight us.
Well,
And so there was no actual repercussions to anything.
my concern, and I'm with you on that, and my concern too is what Infinity Stones we're working with. We're working with every single one of them. So
Right.
which, is this a reality thing? Is Thanos really did because of the battle? Is there some issue with Thanos and the Gauntlet? Is there are we seeing a
Okay.
reality through his
Right,
eyes?
okay, well, actually,
that kind of thing.
The Gauntlet is a very good question because right when he snaps his finger, he's like in a Matrix construct.
Right.
Right. There's like
and the Gauntlet's gone
right,
and everything.
Right, but then when it comes back, the Gauntlet is destroyed. The
Right.
stones are
I
still
saw
there,
that, yeah.
but it's all charred.
Right.
So is the Gauntlet?
Well, the Gauntlet isn't the issue. It's if the stones are intact, the Gauntlet is a construct, and that goes back to the dwarf thing.
Exactly.
And so the dwarves constructed this thing to be able to house the Infinity Stones, but
The powers
channel
in
their
the
powers.
stones.
that's the channel of the power. But does it matter? Like, he has the stones.
The almost seems like he absorbs the power too. Every time he gets one, it's
Right.
it's sort of like he becomes like.
But only when he's wearing the gauntlet.
Right, and I think the gauntlet is buffering him because if you go back to Guardians, if you actually touch an Infinity Stone, you will be destroyed, right? And so the gauntlet is a buffer between the power of the Infinity Stone and not. So, I don't know, man. I think that, honestly, I think there is an alternate, I don't want to say alternate reality, but there's going to be some sort of, not, and I don't want to say rewind of time, but there's going to be some sort of reality issue going into the last one.
Well, I still think it's
and I hope they do. They have to handle that really well because for one, we already know there's a alternate universe because that's where Doctor Strange comes in. I mean,
Right.
he's all about that alternate.
Well, he says there's 14
reality
million
universe.
different timelines.
And
Right.
he can kind of walk and bridge between them. And then again, going back to the DC thing, there's the whole Superman running around the planet like backwards really fast. It's like, oh, see, it never happened.
No, we have a
because I
flashpoint kind of
because I
thing.
made the Earth spin the other direction really
Yeah.
fast, and so that's how time works now. It's
Right.
so there's a good one. I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly don't think they're going
Or
to
maybe they're just
do
all
that.
dead. That would be awesome. I mean, they could.
Or they can all die because we also lost.
This conversation is assuming they're going to come back. Maybe they don't.
Yeah, but think about it. We lost War Machine.
That would be great.
We lost. We lost Rhodey. We lost. There was a couple other big names that we lost that we didn't expect to lose in the end here.
Okay, what I think ultimately is going to... This is my theory. Now, after having watched this and seen some other things, is when Doctor Strange says that there's only one option, right? The only way that they win. And ultimately you find out it's because he knows he's going to have to sacrifice the Time Stone.
Yeah.
Right? What I think is going to happen is that all led to one specific point, and it's the post-credit scene. Because what happens is the post-credit scene, you see Maria Hill and Nick Fury driving down New York when everybody started disappearing. They disappear. He gets on a pager and he messages Captain Marvel.
right.
Right? Well, we already know that Captain Marvel takes place in the 90s.
Oh,
Okay.
so there's a time jump.
There is. And so what I think is going to happen in Avengers, in Captain Marvel, it's going to set up Captain Marvel. And her, because she's very OP.
Yeah.
Right? And she's also spacebound, but she also has mystical powers, whatever. So what's going to happen is you're going to get introduced to her in the 90s. But what's going to happen is when Fury contacts her, somehow Strange saw that the only way to win was to get to this specific time frame,
Right.
where it's going to jump back to Captain Marvel in the 90s and start a new timeline from that point.
I see. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to see where they're going with it. I'm bummed that we have to wait another year to see what happens, but overall, let's talk now. Just overall impressions, where it falls in the Marvel MCU, and let's get the hell out of here.
Okay.
What
Well,
do we
really
got?
quick, just to follow up on
Oh, so you're
the
gonna
the
get-
whole
you're
the
just
whole
gonna give me
starting
more.
a new timeline
Yeah.
is we have these deaths that happen right now of the most popular characters right now that they obviously were building for the future, Spider-Man and Black
Right.
Panther. But what they can do is we can have this in our hearts for a year, and then when they go back and do the new timeline, in this new timeline, it's Steve and it's Tony
Okay.
that sacrifices themselves,
All right.
and they get rid of their contracts, and we have a whole nother year.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I think they did a really good job with this film. I think it was kind of not an impossible task, but a very difficult task of juggling this many characters and over, what are we talking with, 17 movies? And trying to bring all these guys in, 18 movies. Trying to bring...
It just shows what Russo's great. The
Yeah.
Russo brothers are great at.
And obviously they have a vision. I can't wait to see what they do at the end, who they bring back, what happens, whatever. But obviously, and then this opens up for what we're going forward. I really enjoyed the movie. Honestly, some of my favorite parts were a couple of the quips, and also there were some really Avengers-like moments. Honestly, like when the music swells and Thor comes in after he gets his new weapon. Yep. I mean, that was
The
a
whole
cheer
Battle of
moment.
Wakanda was sheer.
Yeah. I mean, the theater cheered when he came in.
Yes.
I mean, there was a couple of stand-up and cheer moments, which is in the original Avengers movie. There was a couple of moments in that one that, for me, that's why I love these movies. Is because if there's a moment where you're hooting and hollering and it's a freaking movie, even if you're at home, that's important.
Exactly.
And they had it and they did a good job with it, I think. and incorporating some of my favorite characters. My favorite characters are the Guardians characters, and they did a good job with that. So that's my 2 credits.
I actually I think it's interesting that they sacrificed so many of the Guardians.
Yeah, and I think they did that on purpose.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only Guardians that survived at this point is
Yeah.
Rocket, Nebula, and
Right,
and
because
Quill.
Mantis, Drax, and Star-Lord both all of them are
No,
gone.
Star-Lord survived.
And Gamora died.
Star-Lord
We didn't even
survived.
talk about Gamora's death.
Yeah, no, Star-Lord survived.
No, he went up,
Are you sure?
right?
I thought he survived, and it was Drax, Groot.
No,
went.
Star-Lord went up.
Are you sure?
I remember thinking that. I have to look.
Then it's just Nebula and Rocket.
Rocket and Nebula are the only ones that left, I
Yeah.
think.
That was well, get back to us after you see it again on
Yeah.
Friday.
Yeah, let me
Groot
know.
went.
'Cause I don't
and
remember.
Drax went.
I honestly
say-
feel like
I want
Star-Lord went
I
up.
want to say he survived,
Okay.
but I don't know. Now
I'll find out on Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah, it's like you were saying, the power dynamics. I mean, to take that many, characters that in their own context or their own universe can just do whatever they want and bring them all together and somehow have a functional power dynamic. That's good writing. That's good.
It's good planning.
Well, it was also very good. I mean, the difference between like this and Civil War. Civil War is you had like actual teams going against each other.
Right.
So you had to say, okay, well, you had Iron Man on this side, and you had Ant-Man on this side. You had to make sure they were all matched up, right? Whereas this one was like a series of boss battles,
Right.
right? So you had to
That's
say,
true.
okay, these 5 characters add up to Ma, and these 5 characters add up to Thanos.
Right,
and it's
right,
like,
It's a little
I mean-
numbers game.
well, exactly. Well, you had the girl henchman, and she was matched up with the main fighter for Wakanda and Black Widow
Black Widow,
Scarlet
yeah.
Witch, or Scarlet Witch, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Other final thoughts, Dan, my friend?
I'd love to see what hit the cutting room floor, because that's always where so much of the such a complicated story with so many different directions. That's where you really see where they were gluing it together, and then thought like this didn't work, that didn't work, and they sliced
Right.
it out. But it would be really interesting to see what
It really
some
would
of, some
be.
of those pieces were.
Absolutely.
Cool. I've got nothing else. Except for it was really good.
No, it was a great film. So
And
let's.
that thing was hot.
Yeah. Sadly, we were in a theater with no air conditioning, so that was pretty
Just like this
brutal.
podcast studio.
Yeah, and this studio's hot as well. So thanks for tuning in to The Usual Podcast. If you have comments or questions, you can find us at theusualpodcast.com. Email us at theusualpodcast@gmail.com. And we are on Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. Find us on Twitter at Darth Pops, which is me. And Will is at Imo Griggs. Are you on Twitter, my friend? Dan?
I have no social media footprint.
Well, I can't help you there then. We're on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, and all that stuff. So find us, like us, and share us. We are help support the show. audibletrial.com/usual podcast. You can get a free audiobook on us. We also have teespring.com/store/usual podcast, and you can buy merch, and that goes to some of it goes to Children's Miracle Network hospitals, and some of it will also help us do what we do. And lastly, but most importantly, patreon.com/usual podcast. We have a ton of tiers and ways to become an official drinking buddy and stuff like that. Help support the show. Give us a couple bucks, and we'll give you stuff as well. So, my friend, should we get out of here?
Let's get out of here. Everybody have a fun.
Yeah, have fun, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks for letting me sit here, you guys.
Dude,
It was
glad
fun.
you were here, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan, for being here as well. Let's get out of here. I'm out.
Peace.
Peace? Is that what you...
Outside.
Fuck with me. We had nobody tune in because they're like, oh my god, I haven't seen the movie yet.
No, somebody popped in a couple times.
Yeah, there were a couple people.
And they heard what you're talking about. Like, oh, get out of here.
They're like, oh, spoilers. Thanks, man. I'm glad you joined us.
Well, thank you. I'm actually